But we in philanthropy are trying to do the work of change in highly uncertain environments, right? And so how can we do that if our cultures hoard information? If it takes 80 people to sign off on something to move forward, if we're unable to hold divergent views and generate from it from love, um, if only certain people in the power hierarchy or people who present in kind of dominant norms in a certain way get to have ideas that actually get heard, and everyone else is expending so much energy playing it safe. Um, and so in this work, this culture conversation just feels essential, and it is such an opportunity to create from a place of love, to give and receive belonging. This is like really joyful work. So I don't want people to come into this being like, this all feels very like hard and ooh. Um, Pia, you talked about the kind of default that's always playing, right? You could kind of say, what if we just don't? The result is not no culture, right? There is something that's filling in the blanks. Um, and that's where I think that this work feels really important. So, I think I'll talk a little bit about, for us, it's been really about assessing where we are, about scaffolding this kind of reflection and learning as a really important tool, normalizing it, because again, there's a default operating, and if we're not speaking into that default, it's speaking. And then, the kind of learning culture that results in. So on the assessing, again, it can start really simple, right? As leaders, if I really take a look at the last 10 ideas that had salience in this organization, 10 ideas that made change for us, where did they come from? Did all 10 of them, and I'm not saying don't listen to our trustees, but did all 10 of them come from our board? Did all 10 of them come from, people who present in a certain way within the organization? Um, and I think in staff roles too, let's look at the last month, in 3 situations where it was a situation of stress or a situation of difference, you know, how how did I relate laterally and build trust in that moment? And I really have to shout out our team at Chicago Beyond, because um, really they make an art form of this, and it is such a joy to kind of see the growth and the creativity around that. I'll talk a little bit about that, the second one, the scaffolding for reflection and dialogue, and then I think um, others are going to talk later about both the learning culture and the normalizing. But on that reflection and dialogue, it's really easy, I think, with this culture stuff to kind of say, is this necessary? Right? Like reflection and dialogue, do we really have time for that? There's so much urgency, there's so much real world happening. Um, and it makes a lot of sense to ask that, because I think the dominant culture, it really feels like what happens out there is separate from what's going on in here, right? Like go out there and be trust-based, go out there and have these transformative relationships that change power dynamics. Um, and to be clear, by reflection and dialogue, I don't mean just looping on the same set of concerns and not kind of doing anything. I also don't mean just kind of analyzing and learning and it never translating to action. That is real, but that is called being stuck. That is not what I mean by reflection and dialogue. It's really recognizing that there are these deep channels of power hierarchy. And if we just try to move money or move influence or cede power, it's just going to flow through those same channels, right? And we can look at public policy examples of what happened with the GI Bill, what happened with the PPP program. And we can look at really personal examples of in philanthropy working so hard to bring community members onto our boardrooms, into our councils, into our staff. And then so many colleagues have shared with me 6 months in, it doesn't actually feel like our decision making is so different. Right. And that's those deep channels that, we have to build the actual skills and muscles to build a different channel. And so at Chicago Beyond, what does that look like? One way that looks is, every month we have dedicated reflection and dialogue. We've done it with Temo Kun's materials. Kim, I think your team has as well. We actually have one on Sean Ginwright's new book next Tuesday, where we're talking about vulnerability and how that can be very nurturing, and it can also be very extractive. Um, I think, more to the point, some key learnings from this is, one, the importance of doing it regularly. This is not something where you like train on it and then it's done. Two, the importance of the whole doing it, right? So this is not just the programs, program officers or, we call them growth, since we're talking about titles here. um, creating some trust-based subculture to go do trust-based things out in community, right? This is the whole organization. Um, and third, the vulnerability, and that relates to the doing it regularly because that develops over time. But the fact that this is not cerebral, like studying something and now I know the 3 points. It's really embodied, an embodied experience of learning something and being embodied with one another and actually taking different perspectives and trying to understand from one another's. And I think that kind of deep work, it can be painful, it can be incredibly joyful, and it creates this kind of collaboration, this ability in the moments when it's hard to actually look at it and work it and name it and talk about it. Um, and then all these things interconnect, I think is my last point.